So this Saturday, former UFC champion Luke Rockhold takes on former title challenger Darren Till in a crossover boxing match. But should we be taking this seriously? Now, you guys might understandably think that this is a bit of filler content, a good excuse while there's a weekend off the UFC. But instead, I think this provides a good opportunity to take a look at a couple of fighters after the UFC. So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at both the careers of Luke Rockhold and Darren Till and their potentials, both fulfilled and unfulfilled. We're also going to get into the fight itself, how I think it's going to go down, and whether or not we should be taking this seriously at all. So let's get into it. Hello guys, and welcome back to Alex on MMA. So we are taking a look at the Misfits crossover boxing fight between Darren Till and Luke Rockhold. But guys, please stick with me to the end, because I do think I've got some interesting insights. It is a bit of a departure from the normal UFC talk, but I think it's equally as interesting sometimes to see what the fighters' lives are like once they leave the sport. And I want to start by talking about Darren Till, because I was very much there for the rise of Darren Till, and the UFC clearly accelerated him into what, in retrospect, was an undeserved title shot against Tyron Woodley. But the UFC did this for a couple of reasons. Firstly, they really needed a British prospect coming through. Michael Bisping had left a huge vacuum after leaving the sport, and Darren Till seemed like the fighter to fit the mould. He was also unbelievable on the mic. After winning fights, he'd grab the mic, call out anyone and everyone, go up to Mike Perry. He was just a marketing machine. And that's one of the reasons why he's been so successful in this crossover world. Because when attention, when eyeballs means everything, Darren Till is the type of guy who's going to create headlines for the good and bad. So the rise of Darren Till was one thing to that title shot against Tyron Woodley, but his fall was equally as steep. After losing that title fight, he went on to get badly knocked out by Jorge Masvidal, and that brought about the end of his welterweight career. So Darren Till, one of the reasons for his fall off was the fact that it was just a huge weight cut getting to the welterweight, and his chin was clearly compromised. I know that Jorge Masvidal has knocked out people before, but you could tell that the brutal weight cut, the water depletion meant that his chin was compromised. And then there was another problem when he moved up to middleweight, where Darren Till wasn't particularly big for the weight. He does have a big frame, but when you saw him during his middleweight campaign, he was quite fleshy. That could just be his body type. We see it with other fighters as well, but he wasn't shredded, really cutting to make the weight like someone like Dricus du Plessis. And a lot of the success that Darren Till did have at welterweight was due to his size and physicality. There was a split decision, very controversial win over Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, where Till actually missed weight, and his size did seem to make the difference in that fight. But when you look at middleweight, that was where the technical side of Darren Till did get exposed slightly, and this is down to a couple of reasons. Firstly, Darren Till's background is Muay Thai. Coming up through Liverpool, he was a Muay Thai fighter. A good friend of mine, Liam Harrison, was telling me about Darren Till the other day during his come-up, saying that he was a very sharp, very aggressive Muay Thai fighter, and so he didn't have a wrestling background. That was something that he learnt later on. On top of that, Darren Till's had an ACL injury, problems with his knees since entering the UFC. So maybe the accelerated title shot was something that Darren Till needed to happen, because he knew that these knee injuries would just be reoccurring. So if he didn't take the opportunity now, who knows when it would ever come back. And with hindsight being 2020, we knew that he never got another title shot during his UFC career. So I do put the decline of Darren Till down to two reasons. Firstly, the knee problems and the ACL. I don't think that's something we can just gloss over. It would be very easy to say the guy just has bad takedown defense. I don't think he has elite takedown defense, but I don't think it was as bad as people made out during his time at middleweight, where he was getting taken down consistently. I truly think that his knees were compromised. Another bit of evidence for that is the fact that Darren Till wasn't throwing as many kicks as you'd expect to see from a high-level Muay Thai fighter, at least a high-level amateur Muay Thai fighter coming over to MMA. I do think that his legs were compromised, and this clearly affected his performances. But anyway, since then, Darren Till left the UFC by mutual agreement, and he decided to enter the crossover world. And his opponent this weekend is Luke Rockhold, a former Strikeforce champion, former UFC middleweight champion, someone who did accomplish everything that he wanted to accomplish in the UFC. But does that mean that I think he's going to win this weekend? Not necessarily. So let's take a look at the fight itself. So before we get into the X's and O's and the technical side of this fight, I want to ask the question, why is each fighter taking this fight? Obviously, money is the number one reason. Misfits pays their fighters very well compared to other promotions, but I think we need to dig a little bit deeper than that. Like I just said, Luke Rockhold has achieved everything that he wants to achieve as a professional. He's clearly just doing this for the money with no ambition to take this any further. And I'm not just saying this without good reason. He's clearly just doing it for the money. The same reason why he delved into the world of bare knuckle is exactly the same reason as why he's taking this fight at Misfits. The guy probably spends a lot of money in his life. He needs something to fund his lifestyle, and that's why he's taking this fight. I definitely don't think he's taking it as seriously as Darren Till, and there's a reason for this. Darren Till has a roadmap in his head of where he wants this Misfits career to go. He's already fought a couple of times on these crossover promotions, and he knows that the more he fights, the bigger name he makes for himself in this crossover scene, the bigger fights that he can get in the crossover world. Ultimately, KSI or Jake Paul, that's the goal for anyone in this crossover scene. And Darren Till's already talking about fighting Andrew Tate, so there's much more of a clear roadmap for Darren Till getting bigger fights on this journey. So I think automatically this makes him hungrier. I just don't see Luke Rockhold having that same roadmap in mind. He just wants to get paid, then go back to LA, do some surfing, go to South Florida, hang out with DC and all the rest. Whereas Darren Till, the younger fighter, sees this more as another step on his career. So with that being said, let's take a look at the profile of each fighter. And the more that I'm looking into this, the more I'm thinking that Darren Till is just a bit more of a fighter and Luke Rockhold is more of an athlete. It does sound bizarre because in the sport of MMA that both guys competed at in their prime, Luke Rockhold was a lot more accomplished. But I think that Luke Rockhold is one of these guys, he's just a freak athlete. I think if he turned his hand to anything when he was in his prime, he'd have been very good at it. I look back at the Chris Weidman fight, probably the best performance of Luke Rockhold's career, where he won the UFC middleweight strap. And I remember watching the open workout, seeing Luke Rockhold, the incredible shape he was in heading into that fight. And I just thought, this guy's an athlete on another level. But as we've seen in more recent years, and in that BKFC fight that Rockhold had against Mike Perry, I just don't think he's that fighter anymore. I'm sure he once was, but I think now he's just a very talented athlete. He'll give it a good go on Saturday. But I do think if he gets dragged into deep waters by Till, he won't have any problem finding a way out. The guy's getting paid. He's going to go back to America and just live his life. Whereas, like I say, on the other hand, I think Darren Till is just more of a fighter. He shows it both inside and outside the ring. The guy's a bit of a scrapper. Muay Thai fights at a junior level, a successful career in the UFC, relatively speaking, and then coming over to the Misfits world, where he wants to keep fighting. He put it on Tommy Fury. And I just can't see Darren Till looking for a way out in this fight. The one caveat might be that we saw Darren Till crumble against DDP, against Derek Brunson. But again, I'm going to put that down to the takedown defense, his knees. I just think when he found himself in these positions on the canvas, he just physically could not find a way out. So I think we put it down to that. But in the stand-up world, where he's got this roadmap with dollar signs in his eyes, I think he's going to fight to the end. I just can't say the same for Luke Rockhold. Now, moving on to how I think this fight's going to play out. Now, Luke Rockhold does have a compromised chin, even at middleweight. He moved up to light heavyweight and got smoked by Jan Blachowicz in his UFC career. And I think that Darren Till will be able to find Luke Rockhold's chin with some kind of regularity. Luke Rockhold has got one of the most beautiful question mark kicks you've ever seen in your life. The guy looks so fluid. If I had to watch one of these guys shadow box, it would be Luke Rockhold every single day of the week. But I think Luke Rockhold, a lot of his offense was to do with his kicks, and he always had that grappling threat. Whereas I think with Darren Till, he relied a hell of a lot on a straight 1-2 down the middle and his big left hand. And in this fight, I can just see Darren Till's big left hand landing multiple times on Luke Rockhold's chin. And I think it will be enough to get him out of there. And Luke Rockhold does look fit. I'm sure he's put in the work. Darren Till holds his chin very high. So if Luke Rockhold is going to have some success, both fighters I'm expecting to be in southpaw stance unless they're just going to throw in a curveball. The big overhand left from Luke Rockhold, that could be on. Because whilst Darren Till does hold his chin very high, if Luke Rockhold dips his head, throws a big punch over the top, that could equally land. So what am I actually saying about this fight? I think it is going to be a battle of the left hands. I can see Luke Rockhold throwing big swings over the top, a big overhand left, but I just think Darren Till is going to be too cute, too sharp. That left hand comes out very quickly, and I think it will just be landing too much on Luke Rockhold. And trust me, guys, if you've seen my fight breakdowns before, I'd love to go into a lot more complex detail about the specific shots I'm expecting from the other guy, but I do think this is going to be fairly routine. I'm expecting a jab left hand over and over again from Darren Till. And Luke Rockhold, if he gets on the inside, I can see some hooks to the body, hooks upstairs from him. But really, I think it's going to just be a battle of the left hand. And as you can tell at this point of the video, I clearly am leaning towards Darren Till in this fight. Look, that's no secret. He's a big favourite heading into this one. But when you take a look at footwork and cardio, this makes me think even more that Darren Till's going to win this fight. I think he's going to be quicker on the feet. We saw Luke Rockhold against Paulo Costa, which was one of the weirdest fights I've ever seen in the UFC, where Luke Rockhold surprised many people by going the distance against Costa. But in that fight, which was at altitude in fairness, he looked really sluggish, plodding with his footwork. And I think Darren Till, he's just been drilling his Muay Thai. He really steps in, he's light on his feet, moving in and out. I can see him just being a bit too quick, too good at distance management to prevent Luke Rockhold really landing on him. And with cardio, let's face it, that's anyone's guess. Both guys have shown questionable cardio in the past. Luke Rockhold in that last fight against Paulo Costa, and Darren Till when he was looking fleshy at middleweight, when he appeared to give up. He looked exhausted in some of those fights. So I don't think that this is a fight necessarily that's going to be won on cardio. But again, leaning towards Darren Till, he's proven in boxing that he can go the distance, he can last the rounds, and I'm expecting something similar here. So we're going to end this video by talking about both my prediction and whether or not we should be taking this seriously. I do think that whether we like it or not, us hardcores, we have to accept that crossover boxing with your Jake Pauls, KSI, Misfits, and the rest, is something that's not going anywhere anytime soon. Jake Paul's just signed up to fight Gervonta Davis. MMA fighters, after leaving the UFC, they're always going to be looking for another paycheck. And this is one way in which they can do it. We're seeing Tony Ferguson against Salt Papi on the same card. And I just pray for Tony Ferguson that he gets out of that one okay. Because Salt Papi, I don't really watch the Misfits, but he does look fairly sharp from what I've seen on Instagram. So whilst I'm not necessarily telling you to tune in on Saturday night and take this one seriously, I do think it's interesting to see the way in which the fight world is developing. So whether you like it or not, that's the reality of the situation. And let's face it, if you're not doing anything else on Saturday night, tune in. You might get some kind of entertainment value out of it. Anyway, moving on to my final prediction. And I think Darren Till is going to stop Luke Rockhold. I'm thinking round 4 or 5. I just think it's going to be too much for Luke Rockhold. I think he probably will look for a way out. Either way, the guy's getting paid, going to go back to America, living his best life, surfing, enjoying the sun and the rest of it. And Darren Till's just going to keep moving forward, whether it's Andrew Tate, Jake Paul, KSI that's on his radar. He's going to keep moving along the crossover world. Will we ever see Darren Till back in the UFC? Definitely not. The guy's getting paid far too much to fight these very winnable fights. Why would he come back to the UFC? So anyway, guys, that was the video today. If you have enjoyed this one, please do subscribe, but don't expect another video like this anytime soon. We'll be back to the UFC talk next week. I've got a breakdown of Mauricio Hufi coming up and a fight breakdown between Nassourdine Imavov and Caio Borralho. So watch out for that one. And I'll see you guys in the next video.